All right, we are recording, and this is the fifth time I've recorded this video. It's a slightly weird one with a lot of me just talking and kind of on the edge of ranting and rambling. So it's hopefully I can keep it straight. But first things first. This is the Eagle Nebula. The images from the Spitzer Space Telescope. There are actually a number of images from the Eagle Nebula, some that are from Hubble. So there's actually just about center, a little bit lower, you can see a structure there, and I'm pretty sure those are the pillars of creation, that if you look those up, there's a Hubble image, a very famous Hubble image of them. And I think there's also another thing that's a bit up, so it's like directly behind my head. Like this right here is another. I think that's just labeled the Eagle Nebula image for Hubble. But anyway, so I need to explain this video a little bit on the rate of technological advancement. The reason I'm making this video is because I misread a comment on another video, on the Dyson Sphere one, which I'm kind of surprised how much attention that has been getting, but hey, it's great. It's, even the comments that are saying that I'm stupid or whatever, it's like, I'm good with that. I'm literally just happy to be here. I'm doing this because I enjoy it, so keep it coming, positive, negative, whatever. Don't be too negative though. I mean, you don't need to just straight up insult, but that's true for anyone. I mean, it's like, you want to tell me I'm saying something wrong, I'm doing something wrong, bring that on. I'm good with the criticism, but don't just say that I'm ugly or something. I know it's true, but you don't need to tell me. Anyway, I misread one of the comments there, where the way I interpreted it when I first read it was the suggestion of doing a video talking about the rate of technological advancement, how humans have advanced through various technological eras, which is a very neat idea, and I'm sure there are other videos that people have done on that, people who are more versed in the technology and in the history of it than I am. But still is an interesting idea, and reminded me some years ago of a thought I had, and I decided, you know what, that's actually worth trying to do a new video on. So yeah, and I shall get to that, but it was, the actual comment was the person suggesting that in like 400 or 500 years, we might be capable of interstellar travel, but he also had some doubts that essentially that some technology seems to only exist to make us lazier, which is in some ways true, but in also some ways not so true. I'll get to that. That'll probably be near the end, but want to get to that idea that I remembered from so many years ago. And to do that, we need to get to some graphs. Oh, wrong one. There we go. Sorry. Wrong scene. But so that is an exponential curve. The reason I'm showing it to you is because there is something in the computer sphere called Moore's Law, which predicts, it's technically an observation, not a law, but that's what they call it. The observation was that approximately every 2 years, the number of transistors in an integrated circuit doubles, okay? And that number of transistors impacts how much powerful, how much performance you can get out of the circuit then. And for a long time, this has been true, but more recently, for various reasons, it has seemingly slowed, and some people think we're not still following it, some people think we are. In any case, it is one thing that, when I was thinking about it so many years ago, it's like, no, this can't be real. I mean, the observation is true, don't get me wrong, it is true. But it can't be real. This can't be how it actually works. And when you actually stop and think about it, well, no, it doesn't, because we're constantly changing the technology we're talking about here. The transistors have very different designs than they did back when Gordon Moore first noticed this. And we're also using completely different technologies to manufacture them, to produce them. So this is really a simplification of a lot of things. And that then got me thinking about a different curve. This one. This is a logistics curve, or S-curve, and also if you learn much about predator-prey models, that's what this is. So as you can see, it starts off very slow, just like, oh here, let me, because I also have this one, starts off slow, just like the exponential curve. It technically here is a little bit low, but I mean, these are just basic versions of both these curves. I could potentially adjust them to have them be much closer, but for now it's just, there they are. It then has a steep incline, but while the exponential curve will keep going forever, you see the logistics curve, and I'm going to go back to just the one, it flattens out. And I've observed this to be my experience when learning skills, and I think it is also accurate for how a lot of technology is developed as well. So you see where it's like initially it's very hard to do, or there aren't enough people doing it, the understanding of it is very limited, but then we start gaining that understanding, and we start gaining a mastery of whatever technology we're doing. And we keep going, and it's just we're getting better and better, but then we start to cap out. And also reach above the screen. Hello. Then starts to cap out. And you can reach that cap, you can reach that limitation for a number of reasons. There can be resources, like you don't have enough resources for something. There can be characteristics of whatever materials you're working with. There can be other resources that you're limited on. You're not just in like hard resources, but energy, light, things like that could slow you down so you can't keep doing things. Just using light because that right now is the easiest equivalence to energy for what I can show. But there's another, and I want to come back to that in a little bit. Yeah, so I think this is very reasonable. But okay, how do you explain then that, the exponential curve is what has been observed, but I'm saying that this is probably how technological development more so actually works? And the answer I have for that is this. So all I did is just zoom out, and also I stretched the logistics curve to just be double its width. But yeah, this is what I think for how technological development actually works. And this is also how I think some like personal skill development can work as well. So what's happening is you're just jumping from one logistics curve to another that allows you to maintain this upward trend. Technically, this doesn't completely follow up the exponential curve, but it's abstract. It's an abstract idea. And going back to Moore's law specifically, this actually makes some sense because we have changed the design of the transistors many times over. We've completely changed the technology we use for manufacturing them. And each time you do that, that would be a different logistics curve. So, for example, when the more recent changes was going from deep ultraviolet, it's a photolithography system, so you're shining light to create these circuits. Previously, we were using what's called deep ultraviolet, so it's just high-frequency ultraviolet light, but not terrifically high frequency yet. Then there's extreme ultraviolet. That's the change that happened, I don't quite remember when. Within the past decade, though. I know it's that recent. I'm not sure if it's older than 5 years or not, but in any case. So that would be another logistics curve. That would be jumping from one of the green logistics curves here to another. But it's also, you only would jump when it's actually ready. So coming back to the just straight logistics, well, we'll keep it here. You have that flat portion there, which technically would be lower down. That flat portion, because it's hard to work with some of this stuff. Like extreme ultraviolet, going to that, it's a very difficult process. It took years and years to finally figure out how to do that effectively, how to do that efficiently. And indeed, they have been getting a lot better at it now that it's actually deployed and being used. So it would have been flat like that, and working its way up, it's still very flat. At which point, the deep ultraviolet would continue to be used because it's better. It would be above that for a while, but then the extreme ultraviolet is able to cross, and so it takes over because it's now the better technology. And that gets us to basically having that exponential curve that was observed with and given the name of Moore's law. But as I said, I think that any technology is potentially going to be like this, where even though you may look at something and be like, oh, look at this amazing continuous development, it's not. It's not been a continuous development. It is just you going from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. So that is continuing the overall progress. But when you look down on a smaller scale, it's this, then this, then this, then this. And I guess with more historical view, one example, how many times I've recorded this, one thing that I'll bring up is like for building structures and such. For a long time, it would have been just wood. Would have been wood and stone, wood and brick. And also we would have wood and concrete and brick as well in there. And those are great materials. For a lot of places, that's all you need. But it wouldn't be enough to do a skyscraper. For that, we needed to get steel. So you had these continuous developments, and there's some that are really amazing. I mean, some... Oh, why can't I remember the name of it? There's one Roman... I cannot... Is it... No, that's not it. I'm sorry, I'm just blanking on the name. But it's the largest freestanding concrete dome in the world. And an amazing piece of both art and engineering for how they did that. And this just does tie into the exponential curve stuff because of that mastery, where people were working with it so much they were getting very, very good at it. Doing things like throwing in ceramic jugs because that shouldn't compromise the strength too much, but would reduce the weight. And this structure itself on the inside of the dome, they have things carved out that again is reducing weight, but the structure in there, it's keeping the strength. It's really amazing. Coming back to the skyscraper thing though, what enabled us to start building skyscrapers was steel. So you would see, as far as larger term architecture, that kind of continuous exponential curve, but it was because you went from wood to wood and stone. Well, let's just say bring in stone there, bring in brick. So now with brick, it's more controlled, so you can stack things up much more controlled in a much easier way and more accessible way. Because you can also do a lot the same stuff with stone, but it might not be as consistent in strength and might not always fit together, so you need the mortar. But even then, it's going to be trickier than a regular brick. And then there's concrete, and it's like, yeah, you would keep working way up, but it would start to taper off because there's limitations to these materials, and then boom, we got steel that can be also manufactured at such a high level that you can spend it. You can use it in buildings. There's only so much of that resource, and it might have been better used here, but it's like, okay, now it's cheap enough, we can use it in buildings, and boom, we got skyscrapers. And things like that. So that would be one of those leaps to a new logistics curve. I think I can end there. Oh, wait, no, actually, I take that back. I do want to come back to this, because I said there was one other thing, one other limitation that I think is important to note, and does start to answer that question, or the point that was in the comment about laziness. Is that another thing that I feel is a part of the limitation, part of why a logistics curve would cap off, if we do assume that my idea is correct, or at least not incorrect. I'll accept that too. It doesn't need to be correct, but at least not incorrect. For technological development, is lack of will. That you can have a technology, and there are technologies that we brought up to a point and then we just stopped. We didn't continue with them, either because something else took over, or no, I can't think of a good example of what I've already talked about. Where there's like a different technology took over, or just loss of interest. And sadly, one example for loss of interest is space travel. Basically, once the space race ended, there was still an interest in maintaining work in there. NASA continued to be useful, but I mean, like, one thing that I certainly do remember is that there was initially the plan to have what we now know as the Artemis program and the space shuttle program running concurrently. But Artemis kept getting delayed because it's not only a government project, but it's a NASA project. They kind of have problems with that. And we still don't really have it realized. But how long has the space shuttle program been mothballed? And they mothballed it very quickly. Now, granted, they did so after Columbia, after a horrible accident that cost so many lives, and could have been prevented as well. If they had realized the severity of what had happened on the ground, they could have done something to address the problem instead of costing the lives. But what happened after that? We stopped. We mothballed. But compare that to the Challenger incident so many decades earlier. Again, the entire crew was lost. The Challenger was lost. What did we do? We built another space shuttle. There was still the will there to keep going. Today, though, or rather, I think, was it about 10 years ago that Columbia happened? I don't quite remember. I'm not always that good at remembering specific dates or even general years. Just order I kind of got. But yeah, we didn't have the will to really continue after that. And that will can be on the full cultural level. It can also just be at the leadership. I think definitely the leadership did not have the will to be like, hey, this is always a risk, but we have to keep doing this because we need to continue exploring, and we know what happened, and we're going to just do what we can to prevent that from happening again. And they did. So they would start every time the space shuttle went up, for one thing, they were monitoring during liftoff much more closely, but also they would have it do a backflip so that the International Space Station, because a lot of the missions were basically just to that, at that point, would do a backflip so that it could then take pictures and inspect. But plenty of other things that could potentially also have been done. But still, as I said, the plan was have the shuttle and Artemis concurrent. Not been the case. Flip side of that, though, with NASA, as I recall, so the original plan for the James Webb Telescope, we can go to that, though. It was going to run concurrently with Hubble, but that was with the original schedule. James Webb got delayed, and Hubble is old. I'm older than it, but still, it's pretty old. 1990. And so they were thinking, oh no, Hubble's going to be shut down. We're not going to have any overlap because they delayed James Webb. But Hubble won't die. It's an amazing... there's a reason why it is called, multiple reasons, the most successful science experiment ever. Because it has made so many discoveries, but it keeps going. We keep managing to keep it going. And I think that that would be an example of there is the willpower to keep it going. So even though, it is kind of capping off there, it is at that limitation, it still is where we got the people that want to keep doing that. And I honestly think part of it is because, not necessarily this one because it's a Spitzer, but it's because we get images like that. And especially with Hubble, because that does cover visible light. I also think, this is my own theory, the James Webb Telescope was actually more a successor to Spitzer originally. It was just going to be infrared. But they then did decide to expand it to cover visible light. I think they made that decision around the time when they were realizing it might not overlap with Hubble. But I think they also realized people like the pretty pictures and having it in visible light, so you get all those colors instead of this that's just like red, green, and there's some blue up there as well. I think they realized that. It's like, we gotta do that because we need to keep that interest. But yeah, so just that does kind of touch on the laziness as well, as the person was pointing out, that yes, technologies can allow people to be lazy, but it is also laziness itself can sometimes retard the development of the technologies as well. It can slow it down and hinder it. So but there's always going to be those people where it's like, I want to keep doing it. I have that desire to discover and such, the adventurer spirit, as it were. And so you keep going. It's like after both Challenger and Columbia, did the astronauts quit? Were the people no longer applying to be astronauts? No, they continue to do that. It helped them recognize that it is dangerous. But they didn't stop because they wanted to do it. They felt a calling to do it, likely. And it's one of the great things to do. Now, the other point that he had about thinking 400 or 500 years before we get to interstellar travel. I kind of disagree with that, but not... I think we could do it sooner. When you think about it right now, let's assume that there's no way to break the speed of light. Technically, things have been found that may enable that, but let's say you can't do that. That would mean then that you need a generational ship. Okay, well that's just going to be a very big ship for one thing. It's going to be a ship that you need to be able to grow plant life on at a minimum. You would potentially also want animal life on there as well. You need some way to recycle the atmosphere. You're probably not going to be able to have enough just plant life to handle all of that. You also will certainly be needing to clean the water, sanitize the water. And this could potentially have to go for decades to even a century, let's say. So yes, a generational ship. Whoever's living on that, they're not going to see the end of their mission. Their kids might, or their grandkids might. So that's going to have to be a very large ship that is going to have to be very, very, very carefully designed so that you have enough there for cycling through the material for that long. And also, if it's a generational ship, you would also have to consider what if the population grows a bit more than you expected. Things like that. And there's also the question of how viable is a generational ship biologically. I'll just leave it at that. But how viable is that in a microgravity environment? Assuming you don't do something to simulate gravity. But it's like technically a big ship. Can be done. And there was, Biosphere 2? Was that the name of it? As an experiment to try to have such a sealed environment that would be self-sustaining. So work has been done on that. I think actually the greatest challenge for doing that today would be the power source. It would have to be nuclear. There's no other option. It would have to be nuclear power. But a lot of those, like a lot of reactors, those are designed for lasting 20 years or so, 20, 30, maybe 40 years. We're talking, and as I said, this is potentially a century to get to the nearest star. And it's also, one thing that's helpful, you don't necessarily need, like, once you get going, like the Voyager craft, it's just momentum carrying them. You do that as well. You would need some ability to redirect, just in case, course corrections, things like that. And if you wanted to land on a planet, you'd also need all of that. But at least those are things that, during the bulk of the voyage, not important. But you'd still need, like, potentially 100 years worth of power. And that's not going to be easy. That would probably, I think, be the hardest part. Because that would mean you'd have to have a lot of nuclear fuel on board. I'm also not sure how well, because nuclear power takes a lot of water. I'm not sure how well that would necessarily work, because that would you'd want that separate potentially. Because also, like, nuclear powered satellites, because we do have some. Voyager, I mentioned that's one. Both of them. That's a thermoelectric system. It's not like what you see in a nuclear power plant on Earth. So it gets complicated like that. But it's like, I mean, technically, I think the technology is possible today, but there's certainly no will for it. Because I mean, you'd have to make a huge ship. Like, potentially might be easier to grab an asteroid, put that in Earth's orbit, completely build out a habitat there, put on engines, put on the power source, all that, and then try to push that thing out of the solar system. That might be more doable. But yeah, it's technically, I think, yeah, it's doable. It's just getting there, for some of it, getting there again, and having that willpower. But yeah, I think 400, 500 years from now, yeah, I think that's possible. I do agree that's possible. It's just, do you want to do it? I guess is the way to put it. And it is, there's one book that I've talked about before, and I will be trying to wrap this up soon, because I know it's getting a little long. Isaac Asimov's The End of Eternity. And there is an aspect there of lack of will is one way to interpret it. Not necessarily the best way, but an aspect to it is you've got people that can travel through time and are doing this to try to correct certain mistakes to avoid great cataclysms and such that humanity faces. But one coincidental effect of this is it keeps stopping any interstellar travel. That it's somehow that's always the cost, which is a little bit of just a contrivance for Asimov, although I shouldn't put it that way, because that seems it's a negative. Because I think at one point it is actually even stated that is almost intentional from some of them. But there is that kind of lack of willpower there from the Eternals that are doing this stuff to allow humanity to suffer, because it will at the same time allow them to achieve something truly great. And that is an aspect of will when it comes to discovery, is you have to be willing to endure suffering to get to the greatness, to reach that discovery there. Yeah. Alright, so hey, I think I actually like how this video turned out. We'll see. So yeah. See you next time.